What are some of the greatest challenges facing fathers today when it comes to raising their children?
I think it's one of them that hits home pretty hard with me is being a distracted father in a world that's vying for your kid's attention all the time. You know, it's a brutal thing that our kids need our attention. They need our time. They need our focus. But yet we live in a world that wants us distracted at every waking moment. You know, just soapbox here, but just look at the world of advertisements that we live in. You know, around every corner, around every street, on your phone, on all of our devices, we are constantly bombarded with a stream of desire and distraction. Things that make us want something else, want something new, want something shiny. Constantly, our attention is being vied for by the world around us, while there is a souls maybe, in our home that need our attention. And they're doing everything that they can to get it. But, you know, this may be insensitive, but your kids are amazing. I'm sure your kids are special. I'm sure your kids are wonderful. My kids are amazing. They're special. I love them. They have nothing on Madison Avenue. They have nothing on Silicon Valley when it comes to attention. Now, I love them more than any of those things, but when it comes to competing for my attention, they cannot compete against these corporations, against these algorithms, against devices. They cannot hope to compete against it. So, do we put the burden on them to be more entertaining than the world around us? Or is the burden on us to shift our attention from that which is entertaining to that which is eternal? So, I think about the parable in Matthew chapter 13 where Jesus talks about the parable of the soils, and he gets to the parable, or the part of the parable where he's talking about the soil that has a lot of thorns and has a lot of weeds and things that choke out the seed so it can't grow. You know, these are the cares of the world, riches, distractions, all these things. They choke out the word of God and make it of none effect. Well, you know, we think about distractions maybe in too much of a narrow framework. We think about distractions like riches. We think about distractions like hobbies. We think about distractions like sin, even. Well, those are all distractions that we all face every day, but what about the distractions of livelihood? You know, this is talk about truths that get hard to learn. Sometimes you get distracted being the provider. You get distracted being the provider of your children's life and not the curator of it. You have to sit back and ask yourself the question, am I building my family's life, or am I just financing it? You know, no dollar was ever worth a moment of time, is the old saying. And again, it might be a tried and trite saying, but your children don't care about your dime, they care about your time. And we need to be really careful that we're not being distracted by things that might seem noble and things that might seem worthwhile. So sometimes the distractions aren't always going to be things that are just objectively evil or easily quantifiable as a distraction. Sometimes they sneak their way in, you know. Sometimes you can't always see the thorns. How many times do we reach for a weed or a plant to pluck up out of the ground and come to find out there's thorns at the bottom of it? You know, they have a good way of disguising themselves or hiding themselves from our view. I think a lot of times distractions have it built into them to hide themselves from us. And again, it goes back to example. It goes back to the example that we perpetuate to our children. Our kids will learn to believe in God based on what we tell them. They will learn to love God based on what you show them. What we tell them and what we teach them throughout their life is going to help them develop a greater faith and a greater understanding of who God is. but allowing them to see him work in us, i.e., becoming less distracted, becoming more devoted, doing all those things that we're supposed to do, are going to be the kind of things that cultivate a love for God in them.